Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Rambles, where we have yet another edition of things I didn't think I had to say, including teaching people how to treat each other with basic dignity and respect. So anyway, how did this come to my mind? Occasionally I go on Twitter. Which is a grievous error. I think we'll all agree. But I have some friends and some artists who I look at there, and that's about the only reason I go there. But I logged on the other day and I saw a quote retweet from a friend of mine, and it got my wheels spinning on this. I'm not going to give the full context because it's kind of complicated, but my friend had quote retweeted somebody in a long series of quote retweets and was mentioning how they personally had just the other day had to go to the grocery store and explain a very, what they thought was basic subject or a basic word, let's say, to an employee for something they needed that they assumed was just common knowledge. And they had approached it with more just surprise than anything. But what got me thinking about this more was the things in the chain of quote retweets under their tweet, which were pretty ugly. No surprise for Twitter, but they were pretty bad on kind of two different facets. So this is really getting to an idea of how do you treat somebody with dignity and respect, even when you are kind of shocked that they don't know or understand something. And the basic answer is just do it, right? But especially when it comes to knowledge, we are in a particular era of, let's say, anti-intellectualism, where both people who have a lot of knowledge are shaming people who don't have the same knowledge as they are. And also people who have a lot of knowledge are being shamed for being too knowledgeable. But from the flip side as well, people who don't know things are being shamed for not knowing things, and people who don't know things are also shaming people who do for, being elitist or whatever. This is not exactly a news story, but it just got me thinking about it, because I can't believe we have to explain to people to not treat people with disrespect just because they have different experiences than you. There's a lot of thought, or there's a lot of complications that go into why somebody does or doesn't know something, and humans on the whole are pretty terrible judges of what information is actually important and the scope of their knowledge. Everybody you meet has some very specialized knowledge that they don't think of as specialized, and you do, and vice versa. We are terrible in general at identifying the things we know and the things we don't know, and how important those things actually are to life. And while it's often easy to, pick out those things that are specialized but less important, like really niche academic knowledge, or a knowledge of a particular game or fan base or something like that, lore stuff for a particular fiction or those sorts of things, it is less common for people to appreciate the niceties of specific knowledge when it just comes to normal life or language or things that one might think of as being basic knowledge about everyday needs, like cooking and cleaning and those sorts of things. But there's lots of assumptions that you can make about somebody else's life experience that might be completely unreasonable because you don't understand the circumstances of their upbringing or the things they've gone through, the things they have or haven't seen. This gets even more complicated when you get into, a lot of cross-cultural exchange, people from different countries, different cultures that have different expectations, even different like facilities and amenities that they grew up with. There's big parts of the world that like just don't have the same type of plumbing and electricity and all these other things that a lot of people just take for granted. But I digress on that. We won't get too far into that because that's where it gets like really complicated. My point here is in a much more like person to person in the same country speaking the same language kind of thing. Because if we can't nail that, how are we going to nail the higher diversity level of things that come with international exchange? So this really has me mostly coming down to two perspectives. One is from the perspective of somebody who has a piece of knowledge and finds out somebody else doesn't have that same knowledge and is surprised. The other perspective is somebody who doesn't have a piece of knowledge, doesn't know they don't have that knowledge, and is met with somebody who is surprised that they don't have it. Now this can get really specific. I think I've talked before about like the type of people who just like act shocked when you haven't seen a specific movie or TV show or something like that. That's a lot more benign. But let's use the example that was in this Twitter thread, which is about language exchange and that sort of thing. There were very bad responses on both sides. One of the responses was basically, don't shame people for not know, or just use a simpler word. There's no reason to expect people to understand that word. I would say that it was a pretty reasonable expectation that someone would understand that word, and that it wasn't directly shaming. This is my personal friend's thing was fine. This is in the quote retweet stuff. And the other side of it was no, people should be expected to know this word. Don't, minimize or coddle people for not knowing stuff. And both those takes, to my view, are pretty terrible. Because if you're met with a situation where you don't know something, we, especially right now, especially in the era of social media, and especially in the era of like this intense shaming that a lot of people do to each other for frankly unknown reasons to me, admitting that you don't know something is hard. Oh, I forgot the other part of this. The other one was, there was another example where somebody was, I'll use the specific word here. They were offered something complimentary at a restaurant, and they offered it was the perspective of a waiter. They offered some guests something complimentary at a restaurant, and they were yelled at by that guest because they said they didn't order that. That's a whole specific thing, but this is the kind of thing. These kinds of exchanges happen all the time. So, one, if you don't know a word, if you don't understand a situation, it does take a lot of self-confidence on some level. It doesn't seem like it should, but it takes a lot of self-confidence to say, I don't know what that means. Could you explain it to me? But if you don't understand that, at whatever level of knowledge you are, please try and do that. This is something I see in people of all walks of life, including myself, and I have to fight it sometimes myself to just, glaze over something and just be like, I don't understand that, but I don't really want to. I always, in my life, strive to be curious and to learn. Personally, my philosophy is that if you can't, if you go through a day and you don't learn anything new, that's kind of a day wasted. Ultimately, what is the purpose of a human life? That's a deep question. I shouldn't delve too deep into that. But to me, it's about deepening your understanding of the world and trying to become a better person as a result of that. I think that's pretty simple. And so taking any opportunity that you can find to learn something new is great. But that's scary for a couple of reasons. One, you have to admit that you lack something, which is already can be, feel kind of shameful internally. And then in our current culture, there's a lot of people who will take that kind of thing as an opportunity to mock you or, hold you accountable or call you stupid or whatever. And again, like I said earlier, that you have no idea what somebody's been through, what words they do or don't know for whatever reason. And so, be open to learning the new thing when you don't know it. But also, if you're in the situation on the other side where you use a word or you say something or you're trying to explain something, somebody else doesn't understand, don't shame them for it. What would be the point? What is the outcome of shaming them? If you think that the best way to encourage somebody to know more, to learn more, to be curious about the world, and to be up to your perceived standards is to shame them, that's not how human beings work. You can. It is psychologically possible to mentally or physically abuse somebody until they do what you want, but it is very ineffective and tends to be very inefficient and tends to have a whole lot of side effects, like they hate you for that because it's a terrible way to behave. So it seems to me, looking at those quote retweets, there's a lot of people who are very comfortable with just shaming people for not knowing stuff. And I think that's grotesque and awful. And if you have the opportunity to teach somebody something, I think you should relish that. Personally, I know that not everybody has the same attitude or the same enjoyment of that as I do, but I love teaching people stuff. It's a great opportunity to both, share in something with somebody. Like sharing, it feels very kindergarten, but like sharing is great. sharing is great, and it brings people together in whatever form that is, whether that's knowledge or time spent together or food or whatever. Sharing with somebody else is ultimately like very much an act of love. It's an act of affection and trust. And same with learning. You trust somebody to teach you and to treat you with dignity while they're teaching you. And so if you find yourself in a situation to teach somebody something, why would you not at least give them, like, unless you just inherently don't respect them as a person for whatever reason, which you fix yourself on that one, why would you not take at least some amount of pride in being able to impart new knowledge to somebody? Why wouldn't you enjoy that at least a little bit? Even if it comes from like underneath it all, even if the only way you can get that is to get through with some like smug sense of self-satisfaction at being better, that's better than shaming them, I guess, at least, if that's the only way you can get through it. But there's so many different reasons and ways to just be kind and to impart knowledge and to become better for it. The other thing I like about teaching is that it gives me the opportunity to make sure I know my own stuff, because that's a great way to know if you have holes in your own knowledge. I regularly repeat the concept that if you can't explain a concept to a fifth grader, you don't really understand it. And there are a lot of people in the professional world, I would say the vast majority of people, in fact, who, when presented with a fifth grader or even younger, really, you should be able to explain your work, the things you do, to any level of knowledge. And if you say, oh, my stuff is too complicated this is too complicated for somebody like that to understand, you're wrong. You're just straight up wrong. And this goes for whether it's a fifth grader, a toddler, or a full-grown adult. If you think something you know is too complicated to impart to them, you are unequivocally, no argument, wrong. All you're telling me is that you don't know how to explain it, because that is the proof. Like, you can always simplify, you can always clarify, you can always cut something down to its simplest parts. And if you can't do that for a subject, you truly don't understand it. So I stand on that, and I will for forever. So to get back to my original point here, whether it's language or any other kind of knowledge, if you have the opportunity to give somebody the grace that they deserve as a human being, to give them the opportunity to learn and to take the opportunity to teach, then do. Treat another person with kindness, because you have no idea why they don't know something or why they do know something, and you don't know what they know. There are probably tons of things that they know that you don't. And so if you just assume that you're smarter than them in all respects, you're also just straight up wrong. Be kind, try to impart knowledge and share with others, and encourage others to do the same with you, because it makes life richer and more worth living when you can do that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Rambles, and I'll see you guys for a different topic next time.